We're not quite back on dry land, but at least we're over it. This is Gozo, and we've crossed the coast at Mjar, the same place that you would arrive if you came by ferry. Before we fly any further, let's get our feet back on the ground for a few minutes and get a flavour of the island. Gozo is much quieter than Malta. It's very rural and time is measured differently here. I guess that many of the sights and smells of Gozo would have been commonplace in Malta 30 or 40 years ago. Here the fields are tended by hand and wild flowers and plants grow vigorously alongside the cultivated ones. Gozo is hillier than Malta. The citadel of Rabat dominates the high ground at the centre of the island. At the heart of each village is a parish church that wouldn't look out of place in some cathedral towns. Chiuquia is a good example. About 3,500 people live in this village, but their church is topped out with the third largest unsupported dome in Europe. The fourth largest is in Malta. Duera is a bay on the extreme western tip of Gozo. At the mouth of the bay is Fungus Rock. The Knights knew about this place and harvested not fungus, but a special plant that they used to make a remedy to stop bleeding. In their heyday, they placed a guard on the rock and rigged up a primitive sort of cable car to get to it. Nowadays, the Gozitans get their medicines from the pharmacy, and people come to Duera for the spectacular scenery around the Azure window. About 40,000 people visit the Maltese islands each year just to dive. Most find their way here to the Blue Hole. On busy days, scuba divers almost have to form a queue to get some time in this 15-metre deep hole. The walls are covered with corals and sponges. Further down, the hole opens out into the open sea where you can swim round to below the Azure window. The waters around these islands are an adventure playground for divers. There are caves, wrecks and crashed aircraft. Some ships have been sunk deliberately in handy places for scuba tourists to explore. Also in Duera, a couple of hundred yards from the Azure window, is the inland sea. It's connected to the Mediterranean by a 200-foot-long passage. In places, it's just wide enough for the little motorboats that take tourists out to pass each other side by side. Now you'll get some idea of the pace of life on Gozo if I tell you that this sleepy seaside village is Gozo's largest resort. It's Marsalforn on the north coast, and it has only one big hotel. In the high season, Marsalforn is a popular holiday destination for mainland Maltese, as well as for us foreigners. It has a small beach and plenty of good bars and restaurants where you can spend a lazy afternoon watching the comings and goings of the local fishermen. Like Malta, Gozo has its share of prehistoric sites. The Gigantea temples are even older than the ones in Malta, and they have a rougher, weather-beaten character. These temples are a part of the landscape, and it's not surprising that they're showing their age when you consider that these limestone blocks have been sitting here out in the open for the last 6,000 years. The temple complex sits up on a hill quite close to the centre of the island. Like the builders of Nidra and Hajarim, Gigantea's architects certainly knew how to choose a location. In the air again, we can see the distinctive cloverleaf shapes of the Gigantea temple chambers. Exactly the same sort of thing that we saw over at Nidra. we're going to fly past the village of Shahra and follow the valley north to Ramla Bay. For the most part, the coastline surrounding the Maltese Islands is rocky rather than sandy, but in Ramla you'll find a fantastic exception. The Maltese call this place Ramla Il Hamra, literally red sand, and it's very popular with bathers. If you believe legends, it was also a favourite of the nymph Calypso, the daughter of Atlas, who for 7 long years delayed Ulysses here during his famous Odyssey. Calypso was a sea nymph, whatever one of those is, and presumably enjoyed a swim as much as the rest of us. Perhaps this was why she chose Ramla as her home. Moving from legend to history, stand by for an exciting bit of undersea archaeology that you can only appreciate properly from the air. The dark shapes in the bay down there are the remains of an undersea wall that was built by the knights to stop enemy boats landing their soldiers here. Straight in front of us is Marsa Fawn. Marsa, I should have explained right at the beginning, is Maltese for harbour or port. That's why it pops up in so many place names. Marsa Scala, Marsa Schlock, Marsa Mshet, Marsa Fawn, and so on. Down there is the Calypso Hotel with its own mini marina. And that conical hill, Talmazu, has a statue of Christ the Redeemer on top. Imagine Rio de Janeiro on a slightly smaller scale. We're back down to about 1,000 feet and we're chugging south down the Marsa Fawn Valley to Victoria, the capital city of Gozo. Victoria was, for most of its history, plain old Rabat, which in most Arabic-speaking countries is a common name for a big town. In 1897 it was renamed Victoria after the Queen and Empress, but the old name proved difficult to shake off, and the city is still referred to by most people as Rabat. For centuries, the citadel here was just about the only place in Gozo where you could feel halfway safe. Pirates paid regular visits to the island to carry off unwary inhabitants into slavery. If there was enough warning before an attack, Gozitans grabbed what they could, headed here for the fortifications, and hoped that their food would last longer than the pirates' patience. For me, a visit to Victoria isn't complete without a slow stroll round the bastions. You get a brilliant view of the island from up there, and apparently on a clear day you can see Mount Etna in Sicily. Now, I can't see Sicily from all the way up here, but I am getting priceless views of the western side of Gozo. The church by itself down there is the Shrine of Tapinu. It marks the spot where 120 years ago a 45-year-old woman, Carmny Grimmer, was walking home past a derelict chapel and heard the voice of the Virgin Mary calling to her. In 1920, work started on this enormous basilica. At the very end of Gozo and 20-odd miles from Lucca Airport, we've reached Wera. This magical spot is the furthest west that we can go without turning this into an international flight. We can't see the Azure window because we're directly above it, but how about this bird's eye view of the inland sea? Not many people get to look at it from this perspective. This is Fungus Rock from the seaward side, another view that's impossible to get as a pedestrian. We're going to turn due east now and make our way back towards Malta. This tiny inlet is Shlendi Bay. If you're in Shlendi and feeling energetic, Climb the steep path from the waterfront up the hill that is directly below us now. You'll get a fantastic view of the village and across the bay to the oldest watchtower in Gozo. If the sea is calm and clear like today, any boats in the creek look like toys sitting on a glass table. Brace yourself now for some even more spectacular views.